Financial Statutes Amendment Act. I'll talk a little bit more about the changes to AISH, the transition to ADAP, and some of the implications there. One thing that I didn't really get to speak to yesterday was the many conversations that I've had with constituents, with stakeholders. As MLA for Calgary-Klein, I'm very proud to have so many hardworking organizations in my constituency that serve the disability community. And, I've heard from the workers in these organizations, the people who access the help within these organizations, and the constituents themselves that are calling and emailing, people who are family members of folks who are disabled, who are reaching out to our offices, who have been for months, in quite a state of distress. And so I've heard so much in this House over the last few days about, I've seen accusations lobbed at the members on this side of the House about how we are misinforming people, disinforming people, and at the same time I am hearing from disability advocates that were appointed by this government who are concerned with this legislation, who are concerned about the impacts on the everyday ability to survive for folks who are disabled. And what I'm getting as an overarching concept, I guess, or theme from the people who have lived experience as disabled people is that they're already living in extreme poverty. Yeah. And the nickel and diming by this government, first forcing them to apply for the Canada Disability Benefit, having them go through all of the different processes, and these are folks with a range of disabilities, but having seen the paperwork that they've had to fill out, having seen the steps that they've had to take to meet this government's demands in order to have that same $200 clawed back. The labor that was involved, the cost outlay, in order to satisfy this government so that they could just take that $200 that they could have used on medications, they could have used on groceries. I have a constituent with various dietary needs who has to pay a little bit extra because she needs to go gluten-free because she's celiac. And the steps that this government forced her to go through in order to take the money, it boggles the mind. It adds insult to injury. These are folks who are already struggling, sometimes even with cognitive disabilities, and this is what they are being forced to do. Some of them don't have the supports. They don't have access to folks who can guide them through the process. It's a real shame, and it's something that I'm ashamed to say is happening in one of the most prosperous provinces and one of the most prosperous jurisdictions, I would say even on our continent. And to think that the most vulnerable people who depend on us are being forced to work even harder for that little bit of money that they need to survive, it's unfathomable, it's unforgivable, and I would say the advocates that are working on their behalf, the people that they have backing them up, they won't forget. They won't forget, and the arrogance that we have been met with in this House by the side opposite around what this means to people, what it tells me is that they are either ignoring constituents or that they're listening and it's not a concern for them. So one thing I would offer is that if the side opposite believes that folks are being misinformed, You know, some of the folks on the other side know what it's like to be in an opposition caucus. You have limited funds, you have limited resources. And I would say that the government has all of the gears of government available to them. They have communication departments. They have people who can do the work. If they are talking about combating misinformation, they have the tools at their disposal. And I would say a responsibility. And if the member wants to go on record, he can go ahead and do that. But they have a responsibility to the folks that they serve. If you have an entire government department that is tasked with supporting these vulnerable people, it is your responsibility to ensure that they have the information. If you are upset that you feel they are being misinformed, well then please do a much better job at informing them. Because for many of these folks, it is life and death. So while there's a lot of bluster on this side, while I know that we are in the last few days of session and that people get very heated in here, this is a plea. If you feel that people are being misinformed, then please inform them. Let's practice a little bit more transparency. Let's take a little bit of pride in our work. If you have that pride in your work, that is not served by bluster in this House. That is served by informing the people that you serve. And a much, much better job can be done. And I'll share an email that was shared with me by a disability advocate, someone who is a community advocate who does as much as she can to help others, even in her vulnerable state. I'm writing to you today as a disabled Albertan who is deeply concerned about your government's recent decisions. These policies are making life harder for the most vulnerable people in our province. The proposed changes to the AISH program, particularly the introduction of the new Alberta Disability Assistance Program, are a step backward. Forcing people who are already approved for AISH to reprove their disabilities is a cruel and unnecessary punishment. This causes immense stress and anxiety for people who are already struggling. Some people on AISH are even considering medical assistance in dying. I will stress, I am quoting a letter. This is not from me as an MLA. This does not show respect or dignity, it takes it away. Many of us in the disabled community feel we are being treated unfairly. We are worried that the government's rhetoric about providing more person-centred support through ADAP will actually lead to a reduction in crucial benefits and an increase in barriers. While we've been told that AISH is the most generous program in the country, many of us are still living in poverty. It's unacceptable that in a wealthy province like Alberta, people with disabilities can't afford basic needs like safe housing and healthy food. Comparing our program to others is meaningless when we aren't meeting the basic needs of our own citizens. I have personally experienced the challenges of the housing system. The recent announcement that tenants on AISH in community housing will now see their rent increase from 17% to the regular 30% affordable amount of their income is devastating. This change, announced alongside the ADAP proposal, shows a lack of understanding of the realities we face. For many, this will force them to choose between having a roof over their head and other essentials. The only thing left to cut from our budget is groceries, which is already a struggle. This will force people to rely on food banks, but for many of us, this is not a reliable option. For someone like me with celiac disease, finding safe, gluten-free food at food bank is nearly impossible. I also have an eating disorder. That makes me a very picky eater. I am not alone in this. Many vulnerable people have specific dietary needs that food banks cannot meet. This is a matter of basic health and survival, not just finances. Finding meaningful and well-paying work is also a huge challenge for people with disabilities. New technologies like artificial intelligence and the rise of unpaid volunteer work are taking away paid job opportunities, especially those that have traditionally been there's lots of crosstalk over here. taking away opportunities that have traditionally been available to us. These trends make it even harder for us to become financially independent. We fear that ADAP will further restrict our ability to earn an income while on the program, trapping us in a cycle of poverty. The government's actions do not align with the values I believe in as an Albertan. We often stand up against unfair treatment from the federal government, but it's hard to make that case when our own government is making life harder for its most vulnerable citizens. This isn't fairness, it's exploitation. History will remember how this government treated its most vulnerable people. A true measure of leadership is how it treats those who are struggling, not just the powerful, and I urge you to change course and choose a path that reflects fairness, compassion, and the belief that every person deserves dignity. I will leave their name, and I guess I leave with that. There's so much more to say. The fact that there is now an increase to the budget of parliamentary secretaries, the fact that this government went ahead and increased the living allowance for MLAs who are from out of town. And that amount was a 270 increase. And now we're looking at the folks who are on AISH who have been forced to get that 200 clawed back that would have provided some support, another 200 less on this new program, and increased rents.
Shameful.
So with that, I urge every member of this House to vote against Bill 12.
Well said.
The honourable member for Edmonton Highlands